So now I have one final example for you, and then you're basically off on your own to experiment, to try your stuff yourself and kind of use those patterns or find other patterns. Now, this one we could call the equal column pattern, something like that. And you would always use that when you have this problem that you have some cards or some elements that you want that are in a container and that you basically want to have an equal width no matter what else is happening with those elements basically. So what we are looking at are basically just those three cards. Now we are not super interested what is basically happening inside of them. We are just interested to make those cards have an equal width, and especially to not be limited to those being three cards. We would also like that to work when those are two cards, or when those are 10 cards or 50 cards, basically, to always work. And so the first approach, my kind of first naive approach, would be to say, when we look at this card here, okay, I'm giving this a basis of auto and just the default properties. Well, let's see if I put them in the container, maybe this will work. So all of those three cards are having the same basis shrink and grow properties. And unfortunately, it doesn't work. And the reason it doesn't work, obviously, is that when we set the basis to auto, those cards are calculating a weight for themselves. And this weight is deciding how much space those elements can have inside of the container. So you can see this first card here has a lot of text, a lot more text than the last card, and that's why it's proportionally much bigger once you set the basis to auto. So this approach does not work. It would also not work if I would, for example, take the last card and set the grow property to 1 here. Now, did I actually set this on the card? Let's go back to 0. Let's set it to 1. And it doesn't work because they are already out of space. They are already covering the whole space. And so the grow property does not help us here. So the next idea that one might have is to say, okay, we will have three cards. We want them to have equal width. So let's just say they should have 33% as their basis. And this now seems like progress, and it obviously is progress in the case where we actually have three cards. But we said that we would like this to work for no matter how many cards we want to add, right? And if you would remove a card, just have 2, or if you would have more than 3 cards, this would sort of work, but you would get in sort of in some troubles, because once they would start to wrap, for example, they would behave differently on different lines and stuff like that. So that is actually just a solution for when you are having exactly 3 cards. And now, as so often in Flexbox, the solution is actually not super obvious, but once you see it, it sort of makes sense. And the solution here is to actually say, I will give those elements 100% of width. Now the result looks the same as before, but trust me, if you would now have more cards, let's see what happens if we duplicate this. You can see, for example, for 5 cards, it also works beautifully, and it would also work, and that is maybe sort of a little bit the magic of this, if you would have something like wrapping here. And the reason that that works is basically quite similar as we had in the previous example, where those elements are not actually considering their content and what they're having inside of them. But they are also told to use up as much space as they possibly can. And since all of those elements are using the space in the same proportion, and they are having their shrink on, that kind of forces them to allow each one to occupy the same amount of space. and also it's independent of the actual number of elements that you have here. So I just hope that you see that sometimes with rather unexpected values, you can create some patterns, and you can basically create yourself a toolbox of patterns that you can then use in one or another scenario. And obviously this can also be applicable for a lot of different scenarios, and in combination with let's say those other patterns. And so again, we will now leave this this section of Flexbox. We covered a lot here, but obviously there is far more in front of you than behind of you in terms of way that you can go. And this sort of thing really is more an art than a specific science, and you can only learn that by doing and by trying out your own layouts. So now we will have one final lesson, I think, on layouts in general. This has, however, nothing to do with Flexbox anymore. And then we will move on to start scripting a little bit, such that the coding guys amongst you might also get something out of this course.